Hello and welcome to Video Revealed. I'm Colin Smith. Let's talk about the top 5 keyframe problems. All right, let's define what a keyframe is, and then we'll look at some of the problems. I've got a little Frogger here as an example. So this guy here is not moving. So if I play, he's not moving. If I move him over here and play, he still stays there. So I need to make a keyframe. Right now, there are no keyframes. This is in the effects controls, and the effects controls are over here if you're in your editing workspace. Double-clicking on the editing workspace resets it. If I click on the stopwatch, I'll add a position keyframe, and that's what this little diamond shape is. It simply says at that point in the timeline, that's where it is, 561 by 540. If I move ahead and then move this over, it automatically creates another keyframe because I've created the first keyframe. There it goes, and there it is. If you want it faster, you move it closer. If you want it slower, you move it away. All right, that's as simple as a keyframe is. But there are some things that happen when you get into more complex animations that can be confusing. So let's have a look. The first thing is not being able to edit keyframes. So let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to open this section up. If you move your mouse in the middle, you can drag that out so I can see more of this. And you'll see a bunch of round dots. And if you try to click on them, you can't. And that's because this needs to be twirled down. You need to open this up so you can see the keyframes, and now you can select them and move them around. Well, let's open up this one, but wait a minute, they also look round. If I close it up, they're round but smaller, and these are round but bigger. And these look like diamonds on one side and a straight rectangle on the other side. That's because there's lots of different kinds of keyframes. Being able to recognize when you can edit a keyframe is really important because sometimes if they're closed up, it might be confusing. In this example here, I'm using what are known as hold keyframes. If you watch the playback, you'll see that it jumps around. So each one of these is a different position and scale, and because they're set to hold keyframes, they jump. Typically, when you add keyframes, you right-click, and the default keyframes are linear, which means that it slowly moves from one to the other. It's a good effect, but if you change that to a hold keyframe, then it jumps around. These are auto Bezier keyframes, and that's why they're round. They're different. I could also select those and convert them to hold keyframes, and it's going to do the same thing. So this isn't about hold keyframes. It's more about being able to see or edit keyframes. Now let me show you what happens when you trim a clip with keyframes. So let's do something drastic over here. I'll put a scale keyframe there, and then this keyframe I'm going to set to 0. So when it gets to here, it's 0. The position on the timeline of where I am here and this position are the same. It helps you understand where you are. But what happens when you trim a clip on the timeline that already has keyframes? If you're trimming it larger, if you're extending it, no problem. If you trim it shorter, you cut off the keyframe. So watch what happens. I'll grab the right end and drag it over here. Now I'm past that last keyframe and I can't get to it. If I want to get to that keyframe, I can't see it. Down on the bottom is a zoom scroll bar. And if you drag that, you can zoom, but you can only zoom out so far. Unless you turn on, it's kind of a hidden feature, but it's critical if you've made this mistake and you can't find it. Sometimes this is an odd thing happening and you forgot you made a keyframe way out, maybe before or maybe after that you can't find. So in the little triangle hamburger menu in the effects controls, click and look for pin to clip, which is turned on by default. Now watch the zoom area at the bottom when I turn this off. The zoom area gets smaller, which means I can now drag this out and move this over, and look, that's where that keyframe is. I'm way over here and the keyframe is there, so I can either extend that or I can bring that keyframe in. So you can wrap that up around the, I can't edit my keyframes. Where are my keyframes? So that's all in the same area. Next up is compatible keyframes. Because sometimes people are creating more advanced animations and they've created some kind of an animation, maybe it's position or rotation information, and then they want to copy and paste that instead of adding all the keyframes again. And that works most of the time if what you're copying from is compatible with what you're pasting to. They have to be. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. If it doesn't, it just means you're choosing something incompatible, like this. So I've got my ballerina spinning around, and you'll see rotation information changing right up there. So she's spinning around. And rotation is a set of degrees. Goes from 0 to 360 to, and then after that, she goes beyond that, so you see the number 1, 2, 3 added to the left-hand side. So I've added a twirl effect down below, and it also is based on degrees. Well, can I select? Oh, let me go back to pin to clip. You see I can't find my keyframes. There they are. So you can select the keyframes. If you click on the name, not on the stopwatch, but on the name, you'll select all the keyframes. So I'll just copy that. And when I go to angle and paste, it doesn't paste in there. It pastes it back up in here, even though I have this selected. So you'll know when that happens that it just doesn't work. It doesn't mean you're completely out of luck. What you can do is you can copy the values and paste them in manually. It's a little bit tedious, but you can do that. So here it's 0, here it's 0. I'm going to add a keyframe. And then at the end, and here's a tip that I always use. If I go to that keyframe, it goes to the next clip. So if I'm working near the end, I'll actually drag this into here, and then I'll drag it back when I'm done. So I'll select this and copy it, go down here, and paste it. Now I have that same keyframe. So I'll drag these over here, and this is what happens. She twirls, and she starts to warp in that twirling motion. So they're not compatible keyframes, but copying and pasting allowed me to do that. This is really, really precise. Yes, it's tedious, but without this, you would have to try to match things by dragging them around. Let's look at another similar example with this UFO. So the UFO is going to fly in, hang around for a bit, realize that we're not smart enough, and then take off. Okay, but when it takes off, there's no motion blur. It's just taking off. And to make things look more realistic, motion blur is what occurs in a camera when something is moving faster than the shutter speed. So if we go to our effects and look for transform, double click, you can see there's position information here too. I can't copy and paste this position and scale information because, again, it's not compatible, but I can copy and paste the values. So let's do that. I'm going to jump to my first keyframes, and I'm going to be doing uniform scale and position and scale. So this is the first position, so I'll copy that, paste it, copy that, paste it, and the scale is 0, so I can just type that in. So that's where it starts. Go to the next keyframe, and this is 965/40, which I bet you if I do this, yes, that resets it because it's just getting into the bin. 0, that one I could copy and paste or just do that. So now it's jumping to that position, and let's jump to the next position. Again, it's the same position. So you don't have to copy these. If you click in this middle button, it will add a keyframe at that position. End scale. Now we need to go to the end. Copy that. Paste that. Make sure you're not copying and pasting into the anchor point. I do that all the time. And then our scale is 0. So I'll turn off the motion and now look at transform. It's the same motion. There's no motion blur yet. But if I scroll down and turn off, use the shutter angle and put in my own shutter angle, like 300, now watch what happens. There's a bit of motion blur there and a lot of motion blur where it takes off. So again, incompatible keyframes, but I was able to work around that. Next one is what I call jumping keyframes. So we've got a jet flying through the sky. It gets to that point, but what I really want to do is have it fly right off the screen. So I'm going to go back to that point and I'll change that over to there and then make that go up and fly out. So now let's watch it fly out. There it is. And that, wait, what happened? It's supposed to fly out. Flies up and then flies back. That happens because I was zoomed out so far, I didn't see that I was actually adding another keyframe. So when you're moving this around, if you add any change and you're not close enough, you'll add another keyframe. And if we zoom in and look, you'll see there are 2 keyframes. So when I make him go off there, he's going to come back because that's the next keyframe. So here's the trip there. I always keep my left finger over the shift key. And when I want to have the position of the playhead exactly at a keyframe, tap shift, hold shift while you're moving this around, and it'll snap right to there. And you can be zoomed all the way out and it will still snap. You can also use these buttons here. As long as I'm not past it, if I'm past it, I have to go back. If I'm before it, I can go to the next one. But I just like using the shift key. Now, when I drag this over to there, drag this up, now we go back, and now it flies off. So far, so good. That was our 3 steps or 3 tips to that. Let's look at number 4. And this is something I call wandering keyframes. This is a title I created, and you'll see these hands come up and a title will show. The problem is the hands move together and then they move away. I want these hands to stay together in one position, come up from the bottom and move, you know, boom, boom. But they're not. They're doing this wandering thing, which is driving me nuts. And I don't want that. So if we look at our keyframes for this, now, by the way, I've got a lot of keyframes spread out over here. If you go to the new little filter properties, Adobe added this recently, and choose show only keyframe properties. Come on, there we go. So now I don't have to go all the way up and down. It only shows me the properties I have. But remember, you have this turned on because this is a global setting. The next time you go to something else, and if you haven't added a keyframe, those properties won't be available. So I turn this on and I forget I have it on all the time. But let's go look at what I need to do. So the shape I don't need, because that's the mask shape that's behind here. I'm not editing that. It's the position information and the position information of the hands. And you can see these are linear keyframes. They're not Bezier keyframes, but why is it doing that? Why is it moving up and around? Well, you can see there, look at that. That's because these are This is where we could set our linear and Bezier and auto Bezier and all of those things and hold keyframes, easing in and easing out for natural movement. And I'll put a link in the description to my natural movement tutorial. But below that is an area that none of us ever look at, and that's the spatial interpolation. And it's already on auto Bezier. So if I change it to linear, now look what happens. Up and over. Beautiful. Up and over. So simple. So that the spatial keyframes that we rarely ever use. Can I be honest with you for a second? Before I knew that, before I figured that out, I actually went into these darn keyframes and I fought with them and I added 3 extra keyframes for each one just to fight the backwards movement of it till I realized spatial, click, boom, done. Oy. Okay, the last one, this is our little Frogger guy, and I'll show you what's happening. Let's go to full screen so we can see. Frogger, instead of jumping, it's wandering all over, and it would have died right there. And the Frogger, come on, baby, where are you going? And you can see instead of doing the typical video game movement, bump, 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 it's floating all over the place. I'm going to show you 2 ways to fix this. Let me open this up because I've got all of these layers together. And here's my frog right there. Yeah, there's my frog. And right now, these are set as linear keyframes. So that means that position there and that position there, the frog is going to move quickly. It won't stop. It won't jump to another. So here's what you can do sometimes. Now I'll show you the best way to fix this in a second, but this is important because the next tip I'm going to show you isn't always available. So what I do, if I have to only use position keyframes, is I move this back 1 frame. And if you move your mouse into the program monitor and use your scroll wheel and go down, or your trackpad, I guess if you're accurate enough, but my mouse actually has little stops in it, I'm now 1 frame before. So I can take this keyframe, copy it and paste it, and now it jumps up. But he's moving on the next one, so I have to do that again on the next one and the next one. So you're defining not only where it is, but where it is until the next one and then the next one. Or our good old friend, hold keyframes. Watch this. I'll select them. This is in temporal. Hold keyframes. And now it works, right? Boom, boom, boom. Get out of there. Get out of there. So why wouldn't I always use hold keyframes? Because sometimes a certain property does not have that option available. Position and position always has every one of those. Transform has all of them, I think. But then you'll find when you use some effects and you'll think to yourself, man, I should use the whole keyframe. You look for it and it won't be there. So remember this method, have 2 of the same keyframes, 1 frame apart, then a new keyframe till the next one. So it's twice as much work, but at least you can get the effect where it's holding until you want it to snap to the next one. So that was my, oh yeah, there's one other thing that I wanted to show you. And let's see if, let's go back to the first one and I'll show you that example. Remember, we were trimming this and the keyframes were not showing up because they were too far. Well, what can happen, and it happened right here, notice how I can't see all of my keyframes and I trimmed this at the bottom. If you can't see your keyframes, then take this and move it. Watch, the whole thing will change when I move this. See that? It's a bug. It's been there forever, and I'm just used to it. So if you ever look at the effects controls and you swear you know that there are more keyframes than you can see, it's because that gosh darn little thing is not refreshing itself. So when you wiggle that handle, boom, sometimes it pops in. Doesn't always cause a problem, but for me, it's always a problem, but I recognize it right away. So there you go. There's some top 5 keyframes that are all mangled in some other tips in there too, but they're all really important to keep in your mind. Bookmark this video so when next time you're doing an animation and something's not working, you can watch it. Hey, if you're new to Video Revealed and you found this informative, take a moment and subscribe. You want to support us some more? You can do that on videorevealed.com/shop. Donate once, monthly, any amount you want. There's a whole bunch of free things to download, become a member, and there's even more. Till next time, I'm Colin Smith, and it's my job to remove all the frustrations out of problems with keyframes and make animating stuff in Premiere Pro so much